Now, with me now for more reaction is Laryssa Waler, Conservative strategist and former Executive Director of Communications for Premier Doug Ford. Laryssa, first of all, let me get your reaction to this. It's the third Conservative MP to cross the floor in the last several months, and I think in particular this one is interesting because back in the fall, Matt Jeneroux said he was stepping away from politics. He was going to resign his seat, and now he's a member of the Liberals.
Well, he was going to resign his seat and spend more time with family because he had, family, pressures or whatnot. And I guess those went away, as they tend to do when it's politically expedient for somebody. I think Matt Jeneroux fancies himself the savior of Alberta, which is interesting. Listen, he ran as a Conservative a year ago. So did the others who crossed the floor. They ran as Conservatives a year ago. In Matt Jeneroux's case, he's been elected as a Conservative 6 times. So when did his feelings change, right? And he cites the Prime Minister's Davos speech as the big moment that, the lights went on and he became a Mark Carney Liberal. The Prime Minister gave a good speech in Davos. Pierre Poilievre even said so. There's very little daylight between the Conservative position on foreign policy and the Liberal position on foreign policy. And it was a good speech, but it was a speech. And I think Matt Jeneroux, looking the constituents of his very conservative riding in Alberta in the eye, when he starts knocking on doors, he's going to get a bit of a wake-up call that these people didn't vote for a good speech in Davos. They voted for a Conservative member of Parliament to represent their Conservative values, and that's not what they're getting.
Does this change to, Pierre Poilievre just got, overwhelming support at his leadership review at the Conservative convention, too, that happened just a couple of weeks ago, from delegates in particular. But with a third member now leaving caucus, does this change your, do you think, Conservative views about keeping him on as leader at this point?
I don't think it does. I think the mandate he received from Conservatives, he got, upwards of 87% support at the mandatory leadership review that Conservatives always say that leaders have to go through after an election. The Conservative caucus is united. Matt Jeneroux, remember, left the Conservative caucus in the fall. So it's not news that he left the Conservative caucus. It's news that he's flip-flopping on his plan to quit. So first he was a Conservative, then he wasn't a Conservative, then he was in the Conservative caucus, then he left the Conservative caucus because he was going to quit being a politician and going to spend time with family. Now he's back being a politician, but now this time he's a Liberal. Explain that on the doorstep of somebody who is struggling to pay the rent or somebody who can't afford the groceries. And the reason he's doing this is because Mark Carney gave a good speech in Davos. If we look at that reality, it's peculiar that somebody with as much experience and honestly, good experience in politics thinks that this is the path to success for him. Never mind the personal relationships that he's built over decades as a member of the Conservative Party that he's turning his back on, the integrity that he's lacking. If I was a member of the Liberal caucus, I understand partisanship. I understand people being partisan and loyal Conservatives. It's harder to understand that flip-flopping and that journey I just laid out that Matt Jeneroux has been on since November. That speaks to a lack of maybe credibility or integrity, and we're going to have to see how the next few months go. And I wish him all the best, but it's hard to understand this one.
It feels like he's going to have some tough conversations at the doorstep of his constituents, clearly, about what, for those reasons you laid out. But let me just challenge you, though. You talk about a united Conservative caucus. Pierre Poilievre stood in the House of Commons yesterday, says that Conservatives have a great team. Yet Jamal Giovanni, he's had to, in the same breath, had to say, at least at this point, that he speaks for himself and that he has not, made a solo trip to the United States as well. It feels like it's more divisive and not as united as it necessarily was, whether a couple of months ago, even a couple of weeks ago.
So the truth about being a Conservative, and this has always been true, has been true when Stephen Harper was the leader, when Andrew Scheer was the leader, Aaron O'Toole was the leader, and now Pierre Poilievre was the leader. We don't all have to agree on the same thing all the time. There are Conservative principles and Conservative values that they live by, that we all live by. One of them is investing in our natural resource sector and using our competitive advantage to better the economy across the entire country. And those are the sorts of things that Conservatives vote for. Those are the sorts of things Matt Jeneroux voted for 30 seconds ago until now he's a Liberal. When there's disagreement on this Jamal Giovanni thing, you're allowed to disagree in the Conservative caucus. It's one of the parts about being Conservative. We don't all have to agree on everything all the time.
Hey, Laryssa Waler, Conservative strategist, former Executive Director of Communications for Premier Doug Ford. Laryssa, always appreciate your time. Thank you for this.
Thanks for having me.